Is Chris Taylor a better fit for the Giants than Kris Bryant? What were some weaknesses with the San Francisco Giants and how can they address it? We have so many questions to get to on today's mailbag edition of Locked On Giants, so all of that is coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants Baseball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Download the app and join me this weekend to get in on the action. And thank you so much for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, which now includes YouTube as well, so please check us out there. And as I said, coming up on today's show, we're going to get into some mailbag questions. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter. Without any delay, let's just jump right in. Candlestick Will asks, is Chris Taylor a better fit than Kris Bryant? Is Marcus Stroman or Marcus Semien or Starling Marte or Mark Canha realistic options? Do they go after Corey Seager? Do you think Farhan spends big on anyone, or does he resist, knowing that depth is so important? So obviously a lot of questions in there, but the place I want to start is that question about Chris Taylor. It's a very interesting one. I actually mentioned when I went on KNBR the other day, I was asked which player in free agency just screamed San Francisco Giants to me, and the answer I actually gave was Chris Taylor. And this was on display. I mean, his skills were on display last night as the Dodgers staved off elimination and Taylor hit 3 home runs in that game. And the fact is, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that Chris Taylor does make a lot of sense for the Giants. Number one, his skill. I mean, he's a good player. Number two, his versatility. He moves all over the field. He can play short, he can play center. And if you can play those two positions, you can pretty much play anywhere else. And also, when you compare him to a Kris Bryant, you're getting, some percent of the skill for a lesser fraction of the cost, most likely. And so that's when it becomes attractive to me. And some people don't like this philosophy, and you just want to say, throw a bunch of money at Kris Bryant. Now, something I just keep bringing up is that I just don't happen to think Kris Bryant is the number one fit in free agency for the Giants. And a lot of that has to do with, I don't think what he's going to get ultimately matches up with the production. I think Giants fans saw when Kris Bryant was a Giant that he's a good player, but I wouldn't put him in an elite category. I mean, he's got that potential. He's done it before, but there are some free agents, frankly, that I just think are better fits. And Chris Taylor, like I keep saying, you'd be getting, 70, 80% of the production for 20% of the cost, something like that. And that's where it becomes attractive. And the last thing is that he has the connection to Farhan Zaidi. Zaidi, of course, was the GM of the Dodgers. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Zaidi specifically who actually, Chris Taylor was a trade that the Dodgers made when Farhan Zaidi was there. I was thinking about Max Muncy, whom Farhan Zaidi is individually responsible for bringing to LA. He, sent him a text and asked him if he would want to come sign with the Dodgers and that they might be able to give him an opportunity at some point. And look what happened. So anyway, that hopefully answers your question. I think you're getting some high percentage of the same skill set, and frankly, probably a better defender, Chris Taylor. And as we can see, he can be an impact player with the bat as well. And the cost is just not expected to be anywhere close. So that's like a market inefficiency. In a way, you would wonder, how is that possible? I don't know. I mean, it's just that I think Kris Bryant is ultimately going to get what he wants for the most part. Maybe not. Teams have gotten smarter and smarter. I just think with Bryant, there's been defensive issues that we saw. And then the bat. I mean, it wasn't really a difference-making bat when he was here. So, yeah, I do think that if I had to choose which one of these players is more likely to end up with the Giants, I would definitely say Chris Taylor instead of Kris Bryant. And that's not to say they're not going to spend. I just think there are other options. You get your Chris Taylor, you get your versatile piece, and then you spend. They've got a bunch of positions to fill, a ton of money to spend. So I wouldn't read too much into it if they sound like they're not super motivated to sign Kris Bryant. I just think that actually makes a lot of sense. So anyway, I know I've taken up a lot of time on that, but just to say, is Stroman or Semien or Marte or Canha realistic options? Yeah, I think that all of those guys you mentioned are realistic options. They're different players. Like Semien, I don't know. I mean, he's got Bay Area ties as well. I think Farhan Zaidi was there when Semien was there and when they traded for him. And so there's all kinds of connections here. Semien, of course, went to Cal. I think he grew up in San Francisco, played for the A's, so there's Bay Area ties. Stroman was very complimentary of Logan Webb during the postseason on Twitter, and definitely they've got to fill out a rotation. He's a possibility. Starling Marte is a really interesting one. Mark Canha, again, makes a lot of sense. Very Giants-type player, on base percentage, kind of undervalued. So do I think Farhan spends big on anyone, or does he resist knowing that depth is so important? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I think that I honestly don't know, but I definitely think that they are not afraid of spending big if the player is right and they think that it's a difference-making player. And I think there are a couple of those players available to sign, but they also have so many positions to fill that we'll just have to see how things play out. So it's going to be a long offseason, and we'll be there every step of the way as rumors come up and all that. So anyway, coming up next, there's a question about what weaknesses the Giants had and whether there's anything in particular I would like the Giants to do to address and or change this offseason. And the answer for me is yes, and we'll talk about what that is coming up in just a minute. But first, slow is just right if you're on vacation, a sloth, or describing QuickBooks. More like slow books. It stinks. Oh, excuse me. No, it sucks you in and slows you down with manual processes, integration difficulties, and glitchy delays that leave you scrambling for the numbers you need. Now is the time to make the switch to NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 financial system, because NetSuite gives you the visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, e-commerce, and more. It's everything you need to grow all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time, no matter how big your business grows. Failing to switch to NetSuite will leave you stuck trying to make sense of your books while your competitors sprint ahead. 93% of surveyed businesses increased their visibility and control since switching to NetSuite. And right now, special financing is back. NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program only for those ready to switch today. Head to netsuite.com/lockedon right now. Get special financing at netsuite.com/lockedon. netsuite.com/lockedon. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors? There's really something for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their favorites. If you don't know the Built Bar flavors, you're missing out. Coconut, cherry, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, German chocolate. My favorite flavor is raspberry, but all of us Locked On hosts, we each have a favorite, and we're very passionate about it. We literally talk about it on a very regular basis. So what's important to me, though, is that these Built Bars taste like candy bars, but come in with a healthy profile just 4 to 5 grams of sugar to go along with 17 to 18 grams of protein. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, here we go. We're going to get into more of your questions. May asks, based on any weaknesses or problems our team had this season, there weren't many, or even something another team did that you liked, had a good player, emphasized certain skills, etc. Is there anything in particular you would like the Giants to address / change this offseason? And this is an interesting one. And actually, what intuitively comes to mind for me, something that stood out to me all season long, was that the Giants lacked the athleticism of some of their competitors. And, difference-making athleticism, speed, stolen bases, kind of dynamic plays. They were an older team, a slower team, a less athletic team, and that kind of stood out to me. They were kind of station to station, and they did hit so many home runs that it didn't necessarily stand out all that often. But there were a lot of times when, I think about Wilmer Flores on the bases and guys just kind of hobbling around out there. I think I already mentioned they were an older team as well, the oldest team in the major leagues. So age is just a number, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything, as we've seen. And you look at, the Dodgers trotting out Max Scherzer and Albert Pujols, guys who are pushing 40. I think Pujols already is 40. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I would just like to see them add that element. And interestingly, I had already been thinking about that. And then Farhan Zaidi, I heard him say it, whether it was in that post-season press conference or in a podcast with Alex Pavlovich and Cole Kuiper after the season, but he said the same thing. He said that he would like to see them get a little bit more athletic. And so, Chris Taylor probably fits that mold. When we're talking about Kris Bryant, I think he's fast, but he's kind of big and lumbering, and I think we saw some of that when he was here. But Chris Taylor would be an upgrade in that department. He is kind of a athletic, speedy guy, but also someone who really stands out is Starling Marte. And we saw Starling Marte put his skills on display when the Giants played the A's. The A's traded for Marte. I actually said prior to the trade deadline that quietly Starling Marte I thought was a bigger difference maker as a rental player than Kris Bryant, and I think that proved to be the case. And Marte was very, very good for the Oakland A's. At least, I didn't check in the last month or so, but for a while there, he was just completely a difference maker with the A's. Seemingly every time he got on base, he was stealing multiple bases, like second and third. So he ended up with 47 steals this season, and Fangraphs had him at 12.3 runs above average on the bases alone. So that's just really compelling and interesting. There is a PED history there and a suspension, but there are other ways to address this athleticism concern. I think about Carlos Correa, and just when you're talking about youth, you're talking about athleticism usually. So there are a number of ways the Giants could address this, but those are kind of some of the names that stand out. And also, I don't know, just maybe I want to say something else about the bullpen and not really having electric stuff, except they kind of did start to incorporate like a Camilo Doval. But before that, these were more contact-oriented pitchers. They had a lot of success, but I think getting a little more overpowering in the pen is something that generally would be a good idea, but maybe Camilo Doval is enough in that regard. So anyway, let's move on to the next question from David, who says, scale of 0 to 100, guess the chances the Giants sign Belt, Bryant, Gausman, Wood, and DeSclafani for 2022. Gosh, that's a lot of players there. I'm gonna be bold here and say 0%. I don't think that they're bringing all those guys back. I would imagine that Kris Bryant is probably not coming back. And yes, he was popular. Yes, he's unselfish and he fit in really well culturally. But I just think they have so many other areas to fill and they can spend that money. There's a lot of good players in free agency. He's among them, but he's not like number one. He's not number one in this free agent class. As I mentioned a second ago, I would even have Starling Marte ahead of Kris Bryant right now in terms of being a difference maker. And I think it's a better fit. I think like because of what I just said, which is that I think he adds a dynamic to the Giants that they don't already have. Marcus Semien I would put ahead of Bryant. Carlos Correa. On and on. I'm looking at Freddie Freeman. I'm looking at Corey Seager. I don't know about Freddie Freeman, but Corey Seager I would put ahead of Kris Bryant. So, and there are some pitchers that would be higher priorities to me simply because they have all these vacancies in the starting rotation. And so I think people need to realize that Kris Bryant is a good player, very good player. But if we're talking about a guy, people are already talking about, oh, could he just play first base? That, to me, when you play first base, you're losing so much defensive value. Even if you're a good first baseman, it's just hurting the team you're not going to want to spend a lot of money on a guy who's just going to eventually be limited to first base because it's hard to provide a lot of defensive value there. And it's much more valuable to play these other positions. But if you don't play them well, then that's hurting the team as well. So, the perfect player is a good defender and a great hitter, a good defender at premium positions. But if Bryant is just a first baseman, then that really hurts his value. So I just don't see him as the best fit. And then you add in the possibility that I do think Brandon Belt will be back, but I would imagine that not all three of Kevin Gausman, Alex Wood, and Anthony DeSclafani come back. All three are due for pretty significant raises over what they got in 2021. Gausman potentially north of $100 million. In fact, I think that's likely. Alex Wood signed for 1 year, $3 million. He's definitely in line for for a pay increase and years increase. And DeSclafani, same thing. He signed for 1 year, $6 million. Each of these guys looks to be in line for multi-year deals now. And I just think one of the three, I would say, extremely likely to come back. Two of the three, pretty darn likely. All three, probably unlikely. And then you add Bryant. That's why I'm saying 0% to answer this question. Anyway, coming up next, more questions, including, are there any players the Giants need to protect from the Rule 5 draft? The answer is yes, there are quite a lot of them, and we're going to talk about who those names are next. But first, we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We're going to get to more questions. This one about the Rule 5 draft is very interesting and something we haven't talked a lot about, but it's actually coming up. In November, the Giants have to make some decisions on this. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, which now includes YouTube. So Katie asks, any players the Giants might need to protect from the Rule 5 draft? And the answer is yes, a lot of them. So the way this works is that what this means is you have to add these players that I'm about to mention to your 40-man roster. Otherwise, they're eligible to be taken by another team in the Rule 5 draft, which takes place in early December at the end of the winter meetings. And if a team takes a player of yours in the Rule 5 draft, that team has to have that player on their Major League roster all season long or on the injured list, the major league injured list. Otherwise, they have to offer them back to you. So you can lose players this way. And some players, if you know that they would be taken and they're good prospects, you absolutely have to add them to your 40-man roster to make them ineligible to be taken. And Elliot Ramos is the big name that jumps off the page for me as being Rule 5 eligible for the first time this winter. So they are absolutely going to have to add him to the 40-man roster because he would definitely be taken and he would be the best player taken, and it's not even close. Like, he's a no-brainer to be added. Where this gets dicey is obviously a 40-man roster can only be at 40 players. You can't exceed that. And if you start having to add a bunch of prospects, that can be an issue because you have to fill out a major league roster. And so the point of this is that it incentivizes teams to kind of push players through up to the major league level. So the Giants had to do this last year with Joey Bart. He was already on the 40-man roster, but they added Camilo Doval and Kervin Castro. These were a couple of guys. That's how they ended up on the 40-man roster. They were so impressive at Fall Instructional League that they felt like they had to add them, otherwise teams would have taken them, and we can see why. But they also, I'm blanking, they added Alexander Canario, right? He had to be protected, and he ended up getting traded to the Cubs in the Kris Bryant deal. So anyway, it can incentivize teams to trade players away if they have too many prospects that are on their 40-man roster, but they're not quite necessarily ready to be at the major league level, especially for a contending team. So I'm going to talk all about this when this deadline comes up. I think it's in less than a month now, mid-November, if memory serves. But yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And some other names, Sean Jelly, I think he will have to be added as well. Matt Frisbee is another name of note. Let's see, not Will Wilson, that would be next year. Tristan Beck, and I believe those are kind of the main names as I scroll through. Seth Corey, actually another name, but he had a down year in the minor leagues after a good year the year before, but he's potentially a guy, maybe they don't add him and then he gets taken and some team just takes a gamble on a Seth Corey. But anyway, yeah, there are definitely some names to look out for, and we will talk more about that as that deadline comes up. So the next question comes from Bo Knows, who asks, do you see the Giants re-signing most of their pitchers or repeating what they did last year and handing out one-year deals to guys who had down years or injuries? So yeah, I don't see them stopping that trend because they've had great success with it so far. And also, pitchers are going to be lining up to sign with the Giants because you sign with the Giants on one of these bounce back one-year deals, and you're just like putting yourself in a great position to go back on the open market the next year and make a bunch more money. We've seen this happen over and over. Kevin Gausman, Drew Smiley, Anthony DeSclafani, Alex Wood. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody else off the top of my head as I'm answering this question here, but they have just had a ton of success with that. So I don't expect that to stop. And I think at least a few guys are going to be brought in that way. But I would also expect them to bring back, as I said, I think Kevin Gausman is likely to return because I think there's just a really good relationship. He's been really good and he loves it here. There's a need on both sides, and I just think that Kevin Gausman will be back. Not guaranteeing that because he could get a very hefty payday and maybe something that the Giants just aren't comfortable with given there's a lot of risk with pitchers. But yeah, so I think it'll be a mixed bag. They might give a big contract to a guy like Kevin Gausman. They might bring in a veteran like Max Scherzer potentially. I think that would be really compelling because he's very good and a difference maker. That's another thing I would like to see them kind of add is star talent, like new fresh blood star talent. I think would invigorate the fan base and invigorate the team. It's kind of what they did with Kris Bryant. It invigorated the team and the fan base when they made that trade So I'd like to see them do something again like that this winter. So I think it'll be a mixed bag of all of the above in terms of how they fill out that rotation, because they have so many spots to fill. Logan Webb is the only guy who projects to be in that opening day rotation who's under contract for 2022. Everybody else not under contract. So a lot of moves to be made by the San Francisco Giants. It's going to be a very busy winter for this franchise. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. There are a lot of other great questions I wanted to get to, but just simply did not have time. So yeah, thanks again to everyone who submitted those questions on Twitter. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Kaspick. That's Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Also, please like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Anyway, have a great weekend. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.